Anthony, thank you so much. Welcome to the program. How you doing?
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, very well, mate. Thank you so much for having me on board.
Happy to have you, man. Happy to have you. I've got a lot of questions for you. So let's start off with an oldie but a goodie. Where did the idea for Lone Wolf World originate from?
Okay, so originally it was called The Outcast. I actually found the book the other day. I handwrite everything, so it was handwritten in a book. And originally it was just called The Outcast. And I didn't really know where it was going to go, but I sort of wanted to make a story about a guy who's on the fringes of society. Not physically, he's actually right in the city, but in terms of maybe thinking that he just doesn't quite fit in. I think what I was actually interested in was the idea of narcissism, because just by observing social media and these sorts of outlets, it was meant to be an exploration of narcissism. So I wanted to create a character that was pretty narcissistic, and I think you agree that he is, but it kind of ended up going into a little bit of terrorism and all those other things as well. So initially it was called I, Narcissist, and it was going to be a 3-part book, and The Outcast was going to be the first part. And then I think Vlog Girl was going to be part 2, and another part was going to be called The Perv. And I wanted to explore different forms of narcissism. But the Outcast, it was initially anyway, was the best of the 3. So I decided to, once I'd finished it, I think it was about 100 pages initially. And then I knew what the story, I knew where it had gone, and I could expand on it. And I went back and started rewriting.
Okay, that's interesting. So it was initially supposed to be something like a 3-part or 3 different characters' perspectives. Is that right? What kind of brought it in to the fore, this main narrator that features in Lone Wolf World? What made you make that decision?
It's a good question. I had written the others as well, so the whole thing was finished. But I just thought The Outcast was stronger than the other 2, and he was such an interesting character. Like, I didn't know when I started where he was going to take me. And as I said, there's touches on terrorism, but I mean, it's not a novel about terrorism. As you know, it's more about narcissism and this idea of being an outcast and being in the middle of the city, but also being a part of it. But it also fits in with the idea of being isolated. I think that's very much a 2020 theme as well. That was just a coincidence that it came out this year. But this whole idea of being in the city, but quite lonely and cut off, and being bitter. I mean, he's a very bitter character. And so, I thought it was well written and it was interesting, and I decided to go back and expand it into a novel rather than as a 1 in 3-part book or even a standalone novella. So expanded it from there.
It is interesting that it comes out now, and given what's happened with COVID-19, this lockdown, that has become kind of more poignant than ever. This kind of pervasive theme of isolation in which we feel, I guess.
Yeah, I think it definitely taps into that whole feeling of being isolated, and yet surrounded by people. I think right now, I don't think we've sort of been. I mean, you hear a lot of people complaining about being lonely, probably more so than ever. And even though we're living mostly in crowded cities, so people are kind of cut off from each other in a way. And it's quite ironic that we have all this social media where we're all connected, and yet people are still become isolated. And certainly he doesn't feel like he fits in anywhere. I mean, he kind of hates everybody equally. I think use that as a tagline somewhere. He's got strong opinions about a lot of things, as you've read.
Absolutely.
But again, I mean, some of the themes are quite universal. So I think people can relate to that idea of not fitting in. The world doesn't understand me. No one understands me. So it ties in with all that sort of thing.
It is definitely a common theme that I've seen a lot. It did remind me of it, particularly given this notion of being isolated within a city, kind of like a densely populated city, and being seemingly at face value being more connected than ever with social media, and yet kind of being more isolated than never before in this sort of abject way. Kind of reminded me a little bit of, I'm not sure if you've read it yet, but Flanagan's latest book, The Living Sea of Waking Dreams. That kind of was also something that he explored in that, this notion about everyone being glued to their phones and kind of moving along or shuffling along through life and never really seeing or connecting with anyone.
Sure, yeah. I'm not surprised that other people are writing about it. But yeah, that didn't. I mean, that is part of the story, I guess. He does talk about the internet and social media. I think I got a little passage actually here I picked out, and I want to read about it because I'm just going to read it out to you if that's all right.
Please.
Just a few lines.
Absolutely.
And he writes here, this is roughly in the middle of the book, we've seen the world degenerate to superficial highs in our lifetime. From the first me generation, the baby boomers, to the millennials, teetering on the edge of an actual cliff edge for fleeting photo fame. Soon they'll be trading in their babies for streaming reality stardom. Wouldn't want to miss out on a flock-inducing trend. So, yeah, I think that's... I mean, it's ironic that he's he's a narcissist. There's no doubt about it. But he's observing the narcissism that's all around him. For people, as we've seen, people risking their lives to get a selfie. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. But look, he is a narcissist. The book, I think I mentioned before that the book was going to be called I, Narcissist.
Yeah.
Originally, and I definitely wanted to explore that narcissism as a metaphor for what I've seen and what we all see now, particularly in the social media realm.
Let's talk about this character's voice because, I mean, undoubtedly a narcissist among many other things, but innately complicated as well, so not just someone that you can summarily put into a box. How did you go about getting into this character's voice? Because obviously I assume his voice was talking to you. So how was it to sink into that pretty bleak, misanthropic outlook on life and sustain the voice? And then, I don't know, pull yourself out of an evening kind of thing?
Yes, well, that's interesting. Yeah, he's definitely a strong character, and I think from the very first line, he was sort of speaking to me, or inhabiting my mind, or I was inhabiting his. I'm not sure. I think once you get into the writing process, the character just takes over, and the character leads you the entire way.
Absolutely.
And I think that's when you're onto a good thing. A sign that you're onto a good thing is when the character's just leading you along, and you're just following along. So yeah, he was definitely sort of inside my head, and because he's quite arrogant, he was quite freeing to write because you can just kind of run with it and you can kind of have a lot of fun. I mean, he says things that we probably all like to say to people who annoy us, especially out in public or somewhere. But he just says it. I mean, we might think it, but we wouldn't dare say it. But he says it. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun to write, I got to say. It
would be fun. I mean, like there was always this borderline feeling that I had that it was darkly humorous throughout. I don't know what that says about me, but I did find it darkly humorous throughout. Yeah, it reminded me. Sorry, you go.
Oh yeah, there's definitely humor in there. I mean, you can't write a character who's that sort of arrogant and narcissistic without him being likable. I mean, if you make him too hard for the audience to relate to, or the readers to relate to, they're going to hate him and they're not going to want to read it. So yeah, you have to make him likable, and you have to make the whole reading experience kind of fun as well, because it's quite dark subject matter along the way. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, you could almost call it a satire. The whole book could almost be called a satire.
It is inherently difficult to do that, and there's only been a few sort of novels and films over the years, like American Psycho, Lolita, Humble Humbert's Lolita. I was actually thinking quite a lot of Gus Bonneau's original film I Stand Alone.
Oh, right. I haven't seen that one. I saw
You should.
Irreversible. I saw Irreversible.
Okay. Well,
yep.
I thoroughly recommend that you watch I Stand Alone then, because
Yes,
it was definitely reminding me of that. It was just this like unrelentingly paced rantings of a madman that just kind of you're immersed in, and it's endeared to you. Like, it's just something that you kind of like can't get away from, like come what may. I mean, it's just, obviously as it continues to worsen and their grasp on sanity continues to lessen, but you still want to stay immersed. You still want to see it and follow it through. So like that's what you've managed to do and sustain it.
Yes, well, the humor definitely would help along the way. But I wanted him to be human as well. I didn't want him to be this sort of cartoon character. You mentioned American Psycho. That's kind of a good example. But American Psycho, it's a little bit cartoonish in the way that the black humor kind of works. But for this guy, I wanted to embed him, and it's not until later on in the book you find out why he is a bit like that, or a lot of the things that's led to him to this state. So he had to be. Look, it's a difficult line. Looking back, I can see it's a difficult line to tread, because he's in one breath he's extreme, but you also have to make him human. Look, I wanted to make a character, and I'm interested in writing about people or characters who act in very human ways. There's got to be truth. It's got to have that element of the universal truth, or it's just fantasy.
I can definitely see that you've done that, like taking the time to just go above and beyond, ensuring he's not going to be deemed just written off as some sort of cliche or archetypal character that just, would immediately audiences wouldn't engage with or resonate with on any sort of level. So no, you've definitely done that in terms of establishing the backstory in the latter half of the novel. Yes,
that's right. Yeah, I mean, it might be a little bit difficult going for a part, but I think if you stick with it, it's sort of it all kind of comes together, and you can definitely see why he is the way he is. Interestingly, with such a strong character, it's going to rub some people the wrong way. And I've actually had a couple of people level this at me that I'm the character, that somehow, because I've written of this character, that's how I think, that's all my views. And any writer will know that that's not the case, J.K. Rowling isn't Hermione, or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I did. I didn't think that. I never thought that.
No. Some people, but anyway, a couple of people have, and they kind of leveled it at me that this must be the way I think. Well, no, this is the character.
No, I didn't think that. I don't think that'll hold too much water. But I mean, like that's unfortunately, I guess that's what you not so much sign up for, but that's kind of what you can be subjected to, I guess, when you write anything at all, particularly in these sort of times. It's just there's always bound to be.
And I think people like to analyze, they try to find that line between author or creator and the art, and I think they like it when it's based on something that actually happened, or it's part of the author's just really telling his own life story. And certainly part of it is you do rely on your own experiences and what you've observed, and maybe some of your own thoughts, but definitely not all of it. I mean, it's crazy.
I think it's just a lot of it harkens back to really demystifying something that's kind of pretty a lot of the time ineffable and difficult to put into words. I guess that's just me hazarding a guess there. But anyway, let's talk. So we've talked about character's voice. Let's talk about sense of place, because I got a very strong sense of place throughout the place that the narrator went to, be it the more inner city areas out into the further out and the shopping centres there and everything in between, including the end of the more sort of rural area that he ended up in. I'm pretty sure, and I was looking out for it, I didn't see any names of any suburbs, anything, or the city or anything like that mentioned. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
I didn't want to particularly, I think maybe the word Sydney is used in the beginning. I think maybe in the prologue.
Really? I was looking out because I started to notice it, and I don't remember ever seeing it like one time. Like me as a lifelong resident, I guess I just envisioned it from the get go. But then I started noticing it. I was really keeping a lookout for it, and I never saw these places are like I've been there, I've been around to. It reminds me of these places that I've been to, but I just never saw a name, and I thought, okay, so there was obviously a deliberate choice to do that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I didn't particularly want to name suburbs or particular locations, and that way, whoever's reading it can identify from wherever they're reading it from.
Yeah.
But we can all relate to this notion of the inner city and the suburbs and the outside the city in the rural areas. So yeah, I didn't particularly want to draw attention to any particular place. It could be anywhere. I think that was the idea, that also that he's roaming around. He's this sort of guy, and this is the thing with the lone wolves too. They could be literally anywhere. You wouldn't know. I mean, ironically, actually, that we're talking about this today. This week, there was a young guy arrested in Albury for plotting a terrorist act. So these people, they're out there, and they could be anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry, Anthony. Finish what
I didn't want to embed it in any particular city, but I was thinking of Sydney, but I didn't think of any particular suburb.
Yeah, I felt like it was less about. Obviously there was care and not wanting to malign a suburb or an area in particular. I do get that, but I was getting the vibes I was getting more was that it was done in an effort to keep it at least well realised as a place that someone could envision, but sort of generic, so that yes, it could apply to any sort of reader from dwelling wherever in the world, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. We can all identify with particular socioeconomic areas, and so once you put it into a city, then it's only sort of as relevant for the people who are familiar with those places. So if I was reading it from Adelaide, I'd like to know that it would just be confusing to me. It wouldn't mean anything in the name, so I kind of avoided the names. And like the character too, he's nameless. He doesn't never go human name either.
No, that was another thing that I picked up on as well. Makes perfect sense. I mean, because it's supposed to be this sort of pervasive figure that's around everywhere. I want to then dovetail into kind of a similar sort of question. So, because you've kept it deliberately nameless, the city, the suburbs, this person, does it make this story singularly or specifically Australian, or do you think that it's given the subject matter and the type of person, it's something that kind of transcends all that, and it can apply to anywhere in the world?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, good question. I think it could be anywhere. I mean, there are some terminologies that are obviously Australian. I think he refers to some bogans at some point and says a few things, but I wanted it to be kind of generic in that way, that it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere, but it's I mean, he goes on a journey, as do every character in a book or a film, but he also goes on a physical journey as well. So it's actually, I think I might have been inspired a little bit by Ulysses, the James Joyce novel, in that regard, that it's a physical journey as well as a mental one. He starts off in one location and he kind of moves around and moves further and further out of his realm of experience or his comfort zone. So I think without wanting to give anything away, where he ends up is quite interesting compared to the journey that went before. Absolutely. So it's definitely a physical journey as well as a metaphysical one, I guess.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about that for a sec, because I'm actually going to jump ahead to another question I had. I feel like throughout the narrator's interaction with society, I think at least he starts off somewhat from a perspective where he kind of essentially determines or allows society to dictate what will then happen. So the thing I'm talking about is kind of when he goes to the shopping centre for the first time wearing the skirt. He wants to see how society will react, how the masses will react, individuals that aggregate into a society. And I was wondering, how much is it how much is society and masses like this responsible in shaping individuals like this? Is it something where, it's just a case of someone slipping through the cracks? Is it something that society that can go about the betterment of to ensure that, these sort of situations don't happen? What's in that dynamic? How much is it society's fault for the way in which they treat someone, the way in which someone responds to it, that kind of can lead to pretty homicidal and or horrific things thereafter?
Yes, that's a good question, Sam. And I'm not sure I have the right answers really, but I think there's definitely that feeling in it, and you often hear from these extreme characters who do carry out things that there's something wrong with society or something poison about it, and there's them and then there's me, or there's them and us sort of attitude, and that you're not, and that you don't belong, and that you're not part of that world, and they've overlooked you, and that can get people quite bitter. And then he takes it that step further and decides to sort of teach the world a lesson, as it were. But again, I think a lot of people do feel that way sometimes, especially when you're young. You can feel like nobody really understands you. So does it shape the individual, or is it the other way around? I mean, that's the question again of how much we recognise other people as individuals. I mean, we walk past people in a crowd and we look at them and we make an instantaneous judgment.
Absolutely.
Based on 1 second, and then we move on. But we don't really think that there's a whole human being there with their full history and a full range of emotions like us. They're not really like us. So, yeah, I think it's just a human nature aspect that, and that some people just can't see others as fully functional or fully rounded human beings. And there's a danger there. I think these people, as you said, they can fall through the cracks if if they're suffering from depression, or they're into drugs and alcohol, and they can feel cut off from society, and especially as we said at the beginning, that it's sort of very much a current theme is this idea that of loneliness and isolation. It sort of comes back to that, and I think it's a growing thing, and I think it's a worldwide thing.
It is,
and it's really sad. Actually, it's sad, but it's something I think we need to talk about and try and work on, and hopefully bridge some of those gaps.
Yeah, and I think that, it's a very, very difficult question. I'm glad that you think it was a good question. I think it's a very difficult question to kind of answer, and there's no real, obviously, definitively correct answer. It's just this. There's such a broad problem that I don't really know if there's any sort of solution that can ever be devised, bar essentially from, I think that all that society can perhaps do is, don't have an immediate summation of one's character from brief interaction and I guess ask questions and offer more services and help and counselling. I guess that's the only thing I could possibly think of, because...
Well, I think too with his social media, I think it's really dictating a lot of society's beliefs and actions. Because social media isn't real. It's not, and the internet isn't real, and even the media itself isn't real. And yet, it shapes our view of the world. I mean, you can get on social media, and if you don't agree with someone, you just delete them, you block them. And after a time, you're not getting a fully rounded view of the world. You're just getting an echo chamber of people who all agree with you, and people who don't want to have an argument, so they'll agree with whatever, So you've kind of got this social media view of the world, which is shaped by your own thoughts and beliefs, and same with the media that we select to watch or follow. They might have a political slant or something like that. And we're kind of lost in this digital world, and it's not really reflecting the full range of people or society, as it were. And I think we're feeling, you see these little terrorists popping up here and there. They're the extreme example, but I think a lot of people are feeling this way, and then you can get angry at the world, because you just kind of, and same with any sort of thing to do with the internet. once you start clicking on certain things or speaking to certain people, you're refed this same stuff over and over.
Yeah.
And you're not and all the other people who you might be your friends on Facebook, for example, you don't even see them anymore. They don't even pop up. So I think there's this danger that we're all walking around in these tiny little bubbles and we're not really interacting with each other, and we could have this false impression of the world. So I think this sort of lone wolf mentality, I think it's a growing thing.
It's incredibly pernicious in terms of if it's allowed to fester like that. I think you're right, and I think that social media certainly, like the internet, it is a tool to be wielded however the user wants to wield it. I guess it's kind of infinite possibilities. Yeah, so it can be for a source of good, and you can provide untold amount of support to those that need it, and it can also unfortunately be used for the complete diametrically opposed side of things. Instead of seeking out kind of light and sunshine, it can be offer this sort of forum for people that might otherwise not realize their full sort of potential, and ultimately kind of go on to do some pretty heinous acts, meet with like-minded types. It's just, and how can you possibly go about... I don't think from an internet perspective you can possibly amend that and change that. Not now. It's the glass is broken. I think all you can do is possibly change the mentality of the individual themselves to prevent them from feeling that they need to go and seek out people, I guess. I don't know. It's a truly tough one. It's impossible to answer.
It's definitely a tough one. But quite often too, people are disappearing into their bedrooms and into these bubbles, and others, even their family, have no idea what's going on underneath their roof. I guess it's like anything. As soon as there are people involved, there's the potential for good and potential for bad and potential for corruption and all sorts of things.
Absolutely.
But any system is going to be flawed, and but I just think social media in itself, I think it's a lot of dangers involved in social media. And I don't think we've really stepped back enough or worked out how to do it, because it suits a lot of people. Companies use it to advertise, and governments use it to advertise. So they want people switched in and engaged. I mean, that's what they want. So, look, it's a tough one. It's an interesting one, but it's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Navigate.
It is a tough one. It's impossible to answer. We could spend all day delving into it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, let's go back to your sort of writing style, because one question I wanted to know, and I really liked this, and there was a very interesting balance that the Lone Wolf World was kind of comprised of. There was the long rants, as you would expect, and then there was these sections of very short, punchy sentences aggregating into very small paragraphs that, and I wondered if that was you balancing your writer self and your poet self, because I know that you're quite an accomplished and prolific poet as well. So I was wondering if that was kind of like you feeding both sides of the writerly brain there, or what, or if you didn't even notice that you were doing that. I don't know. What do you say, Anthony?
So when you say short, are you talking about his actual dialogue, or
not just the dialogue? I mean, there's periods that break up. I mean, there's action, which makes sense to have it quite quick and punchy, but there is moments throughout. I mean, throughout the couple 100-page novel that it alternates. Sometimes within a page, it'll go from one kind of like long ranted paragraph, and then it'll go into these short kind of punchy moments. And I wonder if that was you balancing like this poet side of you and then the writerly side of you, or if it wasn't even something that, it doesn't have to have been something that you can drive to, or it was just subconscious.
It might have been subconscious. I'm just sort of flicking through it now to try and find an example, but often he's stuck in his own head, so he's talking to himself quite a lot. And then his actual communication with people, real people, is quite limited in some ways. But as for the poetry stuff, I'm not sure. I guess if you're writing, you just use whatever comes to mind, whatever your arsenal is. It certainly wasn't a conscious thing.
Right, because you mentioned that you had plans for, there was going to be 3 characters, and then you kind of wanted to, or you wrote them, and then you wanted to focus on this particular character. So was that something that, like, you're a pantser, Anthony, like you don't plan, like you let the characters speak to you, and then the story comes from that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So all I knew was, from this handwritten book that I've got, was that I had given it a title. I called it The Outcast, and then hit the first paragraph, which is still in the book, but it's not the first paragraph now. I think it's about 5 or 6 pages down. But his analysis of people being, I think he says something about little piggies or something like that. So he was that mentality was there from the very beginning. But as far as different styles of writing, I wasn't conscious, mate. It was just the way it sort of eventuated, the way it came out.
Yeah, cool, man.
He led me on the journey. I was just sort of along for the ride.
I'm totally with you on that. I like when that does happen, even if it gets a little bit out of control, because then you're like, oh God, like trying to wrest control. But it just, it happens as this beautiful kind of symbiotic type relationship, and then you just follow it out until it's crazy, unpredictable end.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't always happen that way, but he certainly jumped out, and we kind of went on this ride together. He's definitely quite unique. I actually had someone the other day. She's online friend from America, and she said I should write a prequel to The Lone Wolf World. She wants to know more about the characters.
I saw the comment.
She wants to know. Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. I saw that.
Yeah. So she's quite enthralled with the character. She wants to know more, but I think I gave him enough backstory. I don't know if I don't think I'll revisit that, but it was an interesting comment anyway.
Yeah, it's always interesting hearing what other people have to say about your work.
It's great to hear back. Yeah, because you often don't.
What about your writing process, Anthony? I mean, like, you've been doing writing for a while now. Was it standard fare for the way in which you wrote this book, or was it something different that you haven't done before? How did it kind of go about?
Yeah, no, it was. I'd written other novels that aren't published yet. I might release those later on. So it wasn't the first novel that I'd written, but I pretty much have a process. So I would just literally sit down with a book, because I like to handwrite. I think there's something natural and organic between the pen and the paper.
Absolutely.
I don't type up. I don't write anything on the keyboard or on the laptop. And I think it just gives you that time to think a little bit more about what you're going to write. And it's kind of embedded on paper too. You can't go back and erase it and just go, oh, that's shit, and undo it. So I think it forces you to think a bit more. So anyway, my process is just to sit down and just handwrite and hope that the voice starts to speak to me, because there are sometimes you sit down and it's just not coming. But 9 times out of 10. The character just kind of take over, and I'll just write for 2 or 3 hours, and then it'll be it for the day, and then later on I would start to type it up, because you don't want to end up with a full novel to type up at the end. So I kind of, at the same time or in the same day, I would start typing it up so that at least it's in a digital form. And when I redraft, I would use the digital copy to redraft, because it's a lot easier, obviously.
And has the process changed all that much, or it's kind of like tried and true now that you don't kind of like mess with something that's not broken type situation?
Yeah, even poetry, I which is only short, I still handwrite that. I just find handwriting, I don't know, I just sort of sit down on the couch and then and start writing. So yeah, that's pretty much the way I've always done it, really.
What about what sort of challenges, Anthony, it can be from either this particular novel or any particular standout in your kind of long story career with writing, have you yourself that really stand out to you as a somewhat of a turning point? I don't want to use it, but I'm going to watershed moment in the writing life of Anthony, where you were faced with this and you look back in hindsight now and you think, man, if I succumb to that, if I let that kind of prevail and I didn't prevail, then I wouldn't be here where I am talking to Sam about this craft that I'm keeping away with.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, well, I think a lot of creative people have they have an insecure side, and I've definitely got big insecurities. So I think wrestling with the self-doubt is definitely one of the biggest challenges for me, and for a lot of people, I imagine. So, you know, you kind of have that battle in your head. You know, it starts to talk to you, going, "Oh, this is crap, and it's not going to work," or "I can't write today. I'm not feeling in the right to sit down." And so often for me, sometimes the biggest challenge is just to actually sit down. You know, like get the book and put it in my lap and get a pen. I mean, I can beat myself up over the head. Oh, I'm not feeling it. I don't know where the story's going, and sort of this mental wrestling before I even sit down on the couch to write. So and then I'm finding that at the moment. Actually, I've started another book, and I'm having a lot of that. So it's about discipline. It's about, you know, okay, today or for, you know, 6 days this week or whatever, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to stay there until something happens. And if it doesn't happen, I'll give myself an hour and then I'm going to get up and just leave it. But, you know, majority of the time something will come. It's just getting to that first step, you know.
Man, I'm with you.
You got to push through it.
It's the self-doubt is, the way I liken it too is just the demon, you know, the old Looney Tunes cartoons where there's the angel on one side and the demon on another. You don't have an angel telling you it's good. You just got a demon, or possibly even two fucking demons just sitting on either shoulder telling you it's crap, you suck, give up. And especially if you're, as I know, but you're very well read as well, you know, if you're reading Men Booker winners and all this sort of stuff nightly, you know, and true masters of the craft, then it's real hard to sometimes, because you're just like, when there's people out there like that, you're just like, why do I bother? Like, in the most negative aspect, I mean, like, obviously you keep doing it and it's great that there's these amazing writers out there, but at the same time it can be, particularly if you're in a dark place with it all, it can just be this like final kick in the groin type sitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, look, sometimes I just can't read new books. Sometimes I just can't read it because it'll just make me feel crap about myself. So, you know, I kind of read about 6 books at once, and I'll just pick up whatever book I'm feeling like at the moment. In the moment. So, like, I might read a lot of classics. I don't actually read a lot of new fiction, I've got to say. Because, it can get you down, and sometimes what you're reading isn't even that good. And you go, well, how come I'm kind of struggling along and these guys are getting Booker prizes and stuff? So it's just all the negativity, all the shit that's in your head that you have to try and overcome just before you even begin, you know. And as you said, they're definitely the little blue and red demons on
demons, the devil, yeah.
Oh, that's definitely the case. Yeah, you got to try and. I mean, that's kind of there constantly until you actually start writing. And once you kind of sit down and start writing and you just get a flow on, you kind of just disappear.
It's true.
And you disappear into the work, and before you know it, you're like, a couple of hours have gone by, it's like, oh shit, I've just written whatever, 1,000 words or whatever it is. And you go, that was good, you know? So it's just overcoming that, all that self-doubt and negativity and just write. I mean, you just got to write. I've heard that before. I've heard other writers say it too, that, you know, even just write a shopping list or something just to get writing. And even if it's shit, don't stop. Sometimes I've even put in brackets, or choose another word here, or fix up this paragraph later, or something like that, a little note to myself further down the track. And that's good to do that, because it's not going to be word perfect, and if you're trying to make it word perfect immediately, which I do sometimes.
That's like Hemingway type things, like agonising over a sentence for a day and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, not even that. So I just think, well, it doesn't have to be perfect, you know. I mean, but having said that, I do think having a really good first draft is really important.
Oh, really?
Because for me, I think having that really good, because then you've got less to work with later on. I mean, actually, you mentioned earlier something that you regretted later on, or something you wrestled with. I once did one of those NaNoWriMo months, you know, the novel. Yeah, I once did one of those as a sort of a challenge. I think you write a novel in a month. Yeah. And I did it, but then it was shit because I'd rushed it. Yeah. You know, I'd rushed it, and I did rewrite it, but it took me like 2 years to rewrite it, or a year or something.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
It took me a long time. So it wasn't worth it, It wasn't worth pumping that novel out in a month just to get the word count out, because the amount of work you have to do later. And then it's like what songwriters say too about creating a song. The song just came out. It was just, I wrote this fantastic song that I've been known for 40 years for. I wrote it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then your other times when you're agonising and spending hours and hours over something and it's just not working, well, then it's no good. So I think having that first draft, that's good. If it's good to begin with, then you're going to end up with a good novel. I think if you've got to rewrite the damn thing 10 times, then it's probably a sign that it's not quite working well enough.
Yeah, wow. My novel at the moment, I wrote the first draft. It was about 100,000 words, and I was nearly finished it. And I went to do this 6-month course this year and got feedback about the outline from my classmates who really, really helped me. But I just left that and thought, fuck, it's shit. And I binned it. So it was 100.
You binned 100,000 words.
Binned it, and then started with the basic premise again. And now I'm like editing it down from 150,000 words to, editing it.
That's discipline. That must have been tough to have to bin 100,000 words.
It was, but it's kind of like case in point. It kind of just further validates what you just said there. I mean, like, me, it's just about pumping it out, getting it all down on paper. But I can understand what you said, and I can totally NaNoWriMo is an interesting one because I do think that it does really, really provide this great community. I do think it can really help people to pull their finger out and make them go, no, I need to, like what you kind of harken back to what you said about finding excuses to not sit down. So I think that it's good for that, but I think at the same time it can actually be depending upon case, and it's subjective, it's case by case basis, but I think it can be absolutely detrimental and devastating to certain people because they go, whoa, I just can't keep up with this word limit I've got to do every day, man. 2,000 words, 5,000 words, like I just cannot commit to that. And then it's just equally as devastating because then they feel like they haven't achieved anything that they've set out to do. But it's different strokes for different folks in terms of how you go about doing it. So some people will agonize over a sentence for a day, Flaubert type shit, and then other people will churn out 5,000 words in a day and then go, like kind of me, and I'll go, oh, that's crap, but I'll come back and I'll chomp it over the course of the next 2 years or whatever. It's just there's no right way for it.
No. Yeah, there's good and bad in everything, but it's kind of like a race, really, isn't it? You got to get that word count every day. And it is a lot of pressure, but it's good for people who are maybe first starting out and they've never really made the commitment, or because it is a lot of discipline. It's a hard work. It's a lot of the time, and maybe that's good for those people or who are just starting, or they've always wanted to write a novel but they didn't have the push that they needed. But for me, I just found that it didn't work out. It didn't work out for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyway, Anthony, let's end on another question I always like to ask, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit there, but what advice do you give to any listener, be they an aspiring author or a prolific author, anyone who wants to put pen to paper in rapid succession? What advice would you give that person about writing?
Well, maybe it would probably depend whether it was a new writer, or I probably wouldn't have any advice for prolific writers because they can already write, so they might be giving me advice, look, I've been writing since I was a kid, so I mean, it's got to be a part of you in some way, I think. I mean, you've got to, you often hear people sort of middle age or they're retired, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. Well, if you really wanted to write a book, you would have written it, So I just think you probably already know in your heart whether you're going to be a writer or you're actually going to do it. But don't beat yourself up too much if you can, and you're going to have a lot of self-doubt and just try and ignore it. And it is discipline, like I just say, you have a routine. I say, okay, well, this 2-hour slot I'm going to dedicate to this writing, and I'm just going to sit there until something happens. And if it doesn't happen, well, it doesn't happen, but 9 times out of 10 it will happen. So another thing I would say is you got to write for yourself,
Absolutely.
Don't write thinking you're going to be some famous author, because more than likely it's not going to happen. you have to be happy with it. It's no use trying to write for a particular audience. I've encountered people over the years. I'm going to write a vampire story. I'm going to write a zombie story. It's like, why would you want to write that shit? I mean, there's 100,000 people writing that crap. So write for yourself. Write what makes that you're going to be proud of. Because at the end of the day, at the end of your life, you have to pick up that book or that story or whatever it is and go, you know what? I'm glad I wrote that. I'm proud of that, or I'm happy with that book or that story. So, don't worry about the audience. Just please yourself, and the right people will read it if that's what it gets to.
Very well put, Anthony. Thank you so much for appearing on The Right Way and talking to me today.
Absolute pleasure, mate, and thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Anytime.